This month's inner game video might be a little esoteric. I might go a little all over the place, but stick with me because this is important, all right? So it's gonna start way back when I was a kid. I played a lot of sports, particularly I played soccer. And I noticed this interesting sort of correlation, okay? There were guys who were good players and there were guys who scored goals. And they weren't necessarily the same, right? A lot of times the best player wasn't the guy that put the ball in the back of the net, right? There were also guys that were talented and then guys who showed up on game day, and they weren't necessarily the same regardless of position. Although the biggest correlation was goal scorers, right? I mean, I think there may even be a reason why having sex with a girl is called scoring, because I think there is this huge correlation in sort of attitude, drive, motivation, and mindset that's similar in someone who succeeds in sports, but specifically in goal scoring, or being the guy who like does the heroic play, does the clutch maneuver in sports, versus the guy who steps up with girls. All right, now that's pretty esoteric. It's pretty all over the place. I'll bring it down to earth for you a little bit. All right, so when I was playing sports, I was the guy that I wasn't the gamer. I wasn't the guy who like stepped it up big on game day. I was the guy that worked really, really hard in practice and developed a skill set. And so sometimes I was not just good, but the best player on the field, to the point that every single person stood up and took notice. And that's something I brought before game day. I brought that from hours, days, months, years of practice, dedication, technique, that kind of stuff, where I got to a level that no one could compete with me. But when I was evenly matched, I wasn't the guy who stepped up. There were other guys on my team who maybe even weren't as good as me that would be the guys that step up in those kind of circumstances. And one of the big reasons why, and here's where we get into the really applicable parts of this, is observation, okay? Now, what do I mean by that? Whenever I was truly focused on winning while playing sports, I would play very well. But as soon as any kind of thought of an observer entered my head, I would immediately play at a far lesser level. So if I started, like, say there was like, if my dad was in the audience and I wanted to impress him, or like there was the cute girl that oh, she came to the game today, oh, I better have a good game. If at any moment I started thinking about how my play looked as opposed to how to win, as soon as there was an idea of an observer, it threw everything off. It messed everything up, took me out of my rhythm, took me out of place, that sort of stuff, okay? And this could even be like if I remembered what I was wearing, right? If I'm like, do my shorts look good, right? Anything like that, any thought other than win, any thought other than execute right now, any thought of an observer, any thought of how does this look, immediately fucked it up, all right? Same thing happens whenever we put guys on camera. Right, we have a lot of times students come and we put the camera on them, and all of a sudden for the first 20 minutes they can't game. Like they may have had really good game. As soon as you put them on camera, they're like self-conscious. They're worried about, like, instead of trying to actually sleep with the girl, they're worried about the guy on the other side of the camera and, oh, is this going to seem lame if I say this? And they're holding themselves back. They're censoring themselves. They're playing for an observer instead of playing to win. Okay. And even if you're not on camera, guys are doing this all the time. You hear it in the questions people ask. You hear it in like, oh, but if I go talk to this other girl, will that girl I talked to before perceive me as lower value because I did this other thing? Or if I talk to this girl and there's people around, will they be looking at me or watching me? Here's the funny thing, okay? If you actually didn't think that, if you would just focus on what you're doing, you would succeed and you would look amazing. Because you know what looks better than anything else? Winning. Winning and succeeding looks fucking good. You know what looks really bad? Self-monitoring, right? And so the funny thing is, you're focused on trying to look good, trying to not embarrass yourself, trying to make a good impression. The guarantee is it's gonna fuck you up, make you look bad, and make you make an awful impression. But if you actually just focus on the outcome, focus on the win, focus on the girl, focus on the right thing to do for that outcome, that objective, that's when you will do the absolute best, all right? I'm gonna give you one other kind of example and draw it back in again. A lot of times in soccer, I would be in a situation where I would know there's two options, right? There's the risky play that if it goes wrong, you'll look like an idiot. And then there's the safe play that no one could fault you for. And there are a lot of times when the safe play is not the right play. Right? So for example, you're dribbling, you're in the box, you're a little off balance, and you know you can't get a strong shot off, but you know if if you tried to shoot and you just get it towards the goal and you did your best, no one's going to fault you, no one's going to yell at you, whatever. But if instead you know you're off balance, you take that extra touch to try and set it up, and then you might lose the ball, you might slip, you might not get the shot off, you're going to come over and you're going to get a lecture from your coach afterwards, right? But the thing is, the guys who succeed are the guys who don't care about the lecture from their coach. They're the guys that are not worried about how their actions are going to be perceived. They're thinking one thing and one thing only, and that is, how do I win? Right? They have their objective very clearly in mind. It's not an objective of how it appears. It's an objective of real fact, right? The actual fact of the situation is what matters, not the perception. So as soon as you're imagining an observer, you're in bad shape. You need to live in a world where it's about the truth of the matter, not how the matter looks.